Here is a selection of all the short films that I've made.
So the very first short film that I ever created was A Man Walks into a Bank, and was created over the COVID period, 2020-ish. The animation was very basic and it wasn't that great, to be honest, but it still remains my best film award-wise. It won a few awards, won a few film festivals, and taught me quite an interesting lesson that it's not always the animation that wins through. Sometimes just a good story or a well-timed story or a different story will get you noticed, and that's certainly what this little film was. So it taught me not to worry sometimes too much about perfecting the animation, but the story is pretty much everything. My second short movie that I produced after that was Train Spotter. And this was a very simple story of a boy waiting for trains to go by, and instead of a train going by, a bull on the tracks goes by, chased by some men on a train car. A very simple movie. It did okay in the festivals, but not great. But being my second movie, I was still learning a lot. Then I started creating a whole series of painter shorts. These were each about 2 minutes long. I created this character, the painter, and the idea was that he goes around the world, goes to these exotic places like the pyramids, and paints them. During COVID, he also went to Mount Rushmore and painted the presidents as well with masks, and this surprisingly did quite well. The specific one won some awards. Again, just timing, and the message was right at that time. Very basic animation, quite repetitive actually. I used the same animation over and over and dropped it into different backgrounds and settings, etc. So 2 minutes each, and they probably took about 4 or 5 days to create. So very fast animation, very basic. But this character that I created, the painter, I wanted to develop, so I created an 8-minute movie after that series called The Painter in Paris, where I put him into Paris and he walks around Paris looking for things to paint. So that was a step up from the very simple movies that I'd been making. Then I took it even further and started to create a longer animated movie, which will end up being about 30 minutes long. And this one is called The Painter on Safari. Now, there's 8 parts to this movie, and I've been creating them in separate parts. So each one can stand alone as a separate movie. They're probably 3 to 4 minutes long each. And the first one of this series was part 1 was called Into Africa, and it just covered the painter arriving on safari in Africa on a plane. And then the second part was called A Walk on the Wild Side, and that covered him walking to the lodge and the encounter he has with a lion on that walk. And then the third part is called Dinner for One, and that's when he is at the lodge and he is having dinner with all the other tourists that are on the same safari with him. So that was part 3. And currently I'm working on part 4, which is Zebra Crossing, and that will hopefully be coming out mid to late 2025. So that's part 4 that I'm working on now. Then there's another 4 parts to go, and that will end up being put together into about a 30-minute movie. I've just produced another little short called You're Not Alone, and what I did there is I used some of the material from my Animating with OpenToonz course and created a short out of it. That's something that I've just created very recently. And then I have some productions that I started on years ago and I haven't finished. This one is something I'll come back to. It's a pilot to a series called Moonlight Adventures, and I hope to get back to production on this in the upcoming years. I might need to have a co-production to get this out because it's quite a big one, and ideally I'd actually like to turn it into a series. So this will be a long-term project and will take several years. And then there's a few others that are lined up as well that I'm busy on in the background. So that's my filmography. Those are the films that I've created so far, and some of them have won awards. Most of them have got into several film festivals and ended in various positions. Some have been big surprises, like the Mount Rushmore one was quite a big surprise. and also obviously the very first one, which still remains the best movie as far as awards etc. goes, which is quite staggering seeing it was my first. Alright, that's a wrap of my filmography.